Hello and welcome to the show, the Book It Show, which is being hosted by CNBC, The Art of Writing. My name is Gopalakrishnan. I am an author and Penguin is publishing my book. And I thought I might introduce very briefly. On my right is Sangeeta Talwar. She's authored a book called The 2-Minute Revolution, published by Penguin recently. And we have Chandramouli Venkatesan, who's also authored a book, Catalyst, and that's been selling very well. And we have Ramesh Dorairaj, who has also authored a book called Games Customers Play. So we have four of us, all of us Penguin authors. My book is yet to come in September. The others are already in the market. And what we want to do in the next 10 minutes is to first explore the question of why do business managers write, and should they be writing more? And the second part of the show, we would like to explore what is this distinctive point of view that each author has written to the book and what made him or her write that book. So with that in mind, I would first like to explore the question, and may I start with Sangeeta. Authors and writers make business of writing, but business people are very hesitant to write. Why do you think that is so?
I think, first of all, business people are too busy running business, and they just simply don't have the time, Gopal, to spend the hours it takes to put your thoughts together in a constructive way. And I think that's changing, as you just mentioned, and I think the reason why it may be changing is because today I don't do it 24/7 anymore. I think Chandramouli took some time off when he did the book, so there are instances like that. But I think there's so much activity now in the commercial world, in the business world. There's so many startups and almost on every street corner that I think business people should write more, because this is the opportunity to share their experiences.
And you can see the first signs of it.
Yeah, you can see the signs of it. And I think it's great for the startups and the younger world, which is just getting into business, because they get a host of experiences to learn from.
But also I feel there's one other barrier, which is we possibly think it's a lot more complex than it really is. So when you have not got into the process, it looks like an intimidating thing.
You mean it appears more complex than it really is, so you hesitate. But Ramesh, you may or may not agree with the views expressed, but do you have an angle?
I think, earlier you had to work all your life to make a decent nest egg, particularly in India, and have some leisure time after you retire. And I guess by the time they retired, they didn't have the energy or the thing to write, and they were probably distracted. I see two trends there. One is this, and the other is the maturing of the management as a profession in the country. Even now, most companies are family run, but professional management has started taking a much stronger route. And that means people who've read books like Drucker or Gladwell, for that matter, and therefore they feel the need to express their ideas when they see that at variance to what has been written in those books, or take a sliver of what exactly they've specialized in and then write about that. So I think that's going to increase as the number of the talent has increased. The quantity of people who are managers has increased tremendously in the country. And therefore, I think it's a function of that people will start writing much more.
So it's interesting, all of you feel that, yes, there were mental or social or economic or time barriers, but that's beginning to change.
Yes.
So I want to explore another question in this segment, which is what I call a POV, point of view. I have felt, having been around as long as I have, that managers run through their job as a chore. It's a daily chore. I write accounts, I go to visit distributors, and don't feel the passion that they are doing something different and they have a distinctive point of view. And so they say, well, what is there in the story for me to tell? So what is there to write? I don't have a point of view. So I would like to explore and ask, do you think a point of view is essential? Point of view being defined as a positioning in marketing terms, a distinctive view.
No, I do think you must have a point of view on what you want to share. So if I were to take my book's example, I said my first construct was to say, India of today, everybody wants to succeed. You have 500 million people trying to succeed. So I think my first construct was, how do I help them succeed? And my point of view, very simple, to say you get what you deserve. And in the process of trying to succeed, I find that most people focus on getting. I want to get a job, I want to get a promotion, I want to get an increment, I want to get a title. They don't focus enough on deserving. And my simple point of view is that if you focus on deserving more, you will get more.
Ramesh, what's been your view
my process
about business writing in general in the point of view?
My process was different. It was more about exploring why things happen the way they happen. Why do customers behave in a certain manner? Why do sellers behave in a certain manner? Why do suppliers behave in a particular manner? Under what context? And therefore, is that the right way of doing it? Or is there a better way of doing it? So I didn't have a point of view when I started. It was more an exploration. And by the end of the book, I think I do have a point of view that there are improvements that can be made, significant improvements that can be made.
So you're saying the point of view can evolve
over
as you get into the act. And Sangeeta,
Yes.
what's been your experience?
Well, I had a point of view too, Gopal, but from a very different source. And I think the source was the opportunity I had to build some extraordinary brands and businesses. And I felt that if I could share some of those learnings, my experiential learnings of what has been termed as being successful with people who are in business today, it might be worthwhile. It would benefit them. And two additional things I just want to quickly mention. Two beliefs which come through in my writing. One is about leadership. And leadership is as much about great strategy as it is about excellence in execution and getting into the trenches. And the other one is, if you want to be future ready as a company, and most companies want to be future ready, innovation and customer centricity is absolutely core to their existence. So those are the two points of view which came from this journey over 35 years of building brands and businesses.
Interesting. Well, I'd like to sort of summarize that there seems to be some sort of a harmony in what you say, though each of you expresses it differently, and that's what's very nice about writing, that you could say the same thing in different ways, and sometimes you say different things in the same way. But my experience has, I'm stating my view in a slightly different way. I regard the whole act of business management as a performing art, not as a science. It's a bit like dance or music. Now, if you ask a dancer or a musician, no two performances, the songs may be the same, the nritya may be the same, but each experience is different. And that's true of a manager. All of us know that you might have solved an industrial relations problem or a marketing problem, but the same thing does not apply again. And therefore, there are three elements to the drama that you have engaged in, which looks ordinary. One is the problem that you're solving. Second is the options that you chose from. But the third is the context in which you did it.
Yeah.
Right.
If the context changes, the whole appearance changes.
Right.
And points of view come out of the fact that these three do not combine to be exactly the same for everybody. And if the reader of the book cannot understand, of a business book that is, cannot appreciate that there is a problem, there's this guy's solution, and there's a context, then he will not be able to disassemble it. If he just copies that person in what he tried to solve his problem, it may or may not work. So this point of view is quite an important thing. How did this point of view shape, and how did you bring that shape into your book?
Yeah. So, Gopal, the purpose of my book is to help people succeed. And through my experience, I generated to say there are three important things people have to do. The first thing is your ability to convert time to experience. We tend to think that if we work 5 years, we have 5 years experience. Somebody could work for 5 years and get 2 years experience, and somebody could work for 5 years and get 8 years experience. So my book goes into saying, how can you work for 5 years and get 8 years experience? How do you convert time to experience? Is the first driver. The second point of view I focus on is career management. And what I've observed is most people succeed in the first half of their careers, and very few succeed in the second half of their careers.
That has to do with being a pyramid, isn't it?
Yeah, but still, hence if you're managing your career, you don't have to over-manage how to succeed in the first half of your career. You have to really think hard on how am I going to be successful in the second half of my career. And if you succeed in the second half, you will be a great success. If you succeed in the first half, everybody is a success. Yeah. And the third point of view that I have put is just the construct of work-life balance. And what I find is work-life balance is the one-way street. We focus on the traffic of work to life. In my judgment, the impact of work on life is much lesser than the impact of life on work. And we do not focus on the opposite direction. To say, how can I live my life in such a way that I'll be more successful at work?
And you think that that is a point of view which came to you like a bolt from the blue, or did it evolve?
I think that was an interesting story. I mean, I've been synthesizing this thing for a long time. So if you take my career, I've done 25 years of sales and marketing. But I did a cross-functional stint for 3 years. For 3 years, I was the HR head for Cadbury. And I think that kind of set me into the basic question of the way I defined the purpose of HR is to make people successful. So I started thinking about that question, what makes people successful? Yeah. And I think that journey started there when I was in that role. And I started conceptualizing these principles. I saw the people who were most successful were those who were more adept at converting time to experience. The people who were successful were those who brought their life into play and to work.
Wonderful. So that's Catalyst from Chandramouli Venkatesan. And I would like to look at the 2-minute revolution launched by Sangeeta and other interesting things, Jagore and so on and so forth. So Sangeeta, what's your take on this point of view?
I think the first one is on leadership. And I think leadership in my book is as much of flying with the birds, as I call it, which is taking a 30,000 feet view of where you are in order to know where you want to go. And where you want to go actually is a rough and tough journey sometimes, because it's not only about thinking through where you want to go, but actually getting there, which means you have to be in the trenches. And I've referred to that as walking with the ants. So in my book, a good leader is somebody who can actually ricochet out and fly with the birds at one level and actually be able to get into the trenches, walk with the ants, and get the job done at the other level. And I think it needs passion, vision, and it's certainly doable. Of course, it may mean you have to be on the chopping block sometimes, but that's part of leadership. The other thing that I've tried to bring out in this book is that in order to build iconic brands, there's some basic things you need to do. You need to be deeply and continuously engaged with the consumer in order to keep a pace with how he's changing and in order to stay ahead of the game. And you need to have a very clear idea of what is your brand promise and to whom are you making that brand promise. And the third very important aspect on trying to build iconic brands is to make sure that there's consistency in delivery. And that consistency is unequivocal, and it is at all times, and it's in all places. And that's the second point. And I think the third I'd like to mention is that at the time when we started all the development work around Maggi, it was a very different era. And it was almost like, bearing a child. Okay, we created it from scratch, and we had that love and affection for it. And it's possible to do this. And I want to mention it was at a time when there were hardly any women in business. There were no women in business. So actually, I was the first woman that Nestle hired into the management cadre in India. So that came with, its some challenges and several opportunities. But sadly, a few years ago, when this whole debacle around Maggi happened, I was really, really very upset that day. And I was quite shocked to see the impact of negative advocacy on social media. You know, a brand which had been painstakingly built over some 20, 25 years was steeply on its way down in 48 hours. But I'm very happy to see that Nestle has built the brand back up almost to the level where it was.
Great story. So there's a 1-minute formula from a 2-minute revolution. We create our businesses with passion. We treat it like our child. And when something bad happens, God forbid, we feel bad for it.
Yeah.
And Ramesh, you come from a different world.
Yeah, I come from the IT world, yes. So this is a culmination perhaps of the number of experiences that I've had all over the world. and then thinking about it and then coming out. So some of the points that I have which are probably of interest is one, don't get too close to the customer if it's not necessary.
Don't get too close.
Yes. Customer centricity is not about going and hugging the customer. It's about giving the space and doing the appropriate thing based on the kind of services that you have. I mean, let's, for example, tomorrow the milkman comes to you and gives you a feedback form. What will you feel? I mean, it'll creep you out because they're not there to do that. They're there to put the milk and go. You don't know the person's name. For all you know, they don't know your name, but the business goes on. So when you're in that kind of a business, if you spend more money trying to get close to the customer, it might actually be counterproductive. So there are some counterintuitive things out there in the market. That's one. The other thing is, if you try to keep doing this value add, etc., there are customers who will take advantage of you. And if that becomes a pattern, selecting the wrong customers can lead you down the path of loss and all the other things that come with it. So that's the second point, that choose your customers wisely. Third is, if you really want to identify the difficult markets and avoid them or change it to your favor, then you have to do a series of things to do that. And that is what is in my book. So the market reality may be something. So how do you change that to your favor?
So you got three different perspectives out of the books that you have here. Catalyst from Mouli, 2-Minute Revolution from Sangeeta, and Games Customers Play from Ramesh. So my book is to come out in September. It's called Crash. And the subtitle of the book is Lessons from the Rise and the Exit of CEOs.
Okay.
Somewhere in the middle of my career, when I was maybe 45, 50, I realized that I spent all my life trying to figure out how to get good appraisals, confidential reports, ratings, nominations on courses. And like me, many others have done so and become CEOs. And then I suddenly found their heads getting chopped off. And I started getting interested in why this happens. I have chosen 15 companies and CEOs, all of whom relate to the period of my career. So it's after 1967 and before 2015. And therefore I got interested in these people, dramatic people like Lee Iacocca, like Jamie Dimon, like Vikram Pandit,
Right.
with very dramatic exits. Obviously I left out those who went on ethical or harassment grounds. Those were not material to the subject. And I put them together to say what happens to these people. And I also chose companies where I am not involved because my emotions will cloud me. I'd just like to wrap it up by saying, well, there are 15 stories, but this is not a storybook. So the first part of the book says what happens, what is common across these people, across countries, across nationalities. And I came to a startling conclusion that power damages the brain. You and I have been through that damage process. Luckily, not permanent damage, but it's like iron filings. You put a magnet around it, they realign. You take the magnet away, they settle back again. But if you magnetize the iron filings because the magnetic force has been there very long, it may get permanently magnetized or semi-magnetized. And that's what happens with power. And in what way it actually damages the brain is that it actually changes the hormonal balance of your brain, which makes you want to be mean to people and tough. Now, it's a tendency, not that every reader becomes mean. And I was able to now start connecting that those who could fight this, it's like a toxin in your body. You could fight that toxin. You can't remove the toxin, you can't avoid the toxin, but you could fight the toxin. And if you did that, you survived and grew. And those who didn't, by the way, this doesn't happen only to a CEO, it happens to a chairman of a board, it happens to a director. Many of us serve as independent directors. It happens to us because you're in a very powerful position. And therefore, I found it very interesting to talk of the exit of these people rather than their fall, Because the word fall suggests value judgment, that they have done something wrong. And I can tell you, in my study, I found many of them have done brilliantly well after their exit from a company.
Yes.
Jamie Dimon in banking, John Walters in AT&T, very, very fabulous Cardi Fiorina from HP. And so, exit is not the end of the world. And that's a new phenomenon in India. Today in India, an exit looks like the end of the world. I suspect that is also going to change. So it's been fun talking about these books. And I hope you all enjoyed the show.
Definitely. Thank you.
And I would like to close this, bring the second part of the show to an end and say that I would like more managers to read more books so that more writers can write more books. And I wish good luck to all of the writers who are aspiring. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the show.